advise the House on the circumstances leading up to Qantas's decision to lock out its workforce and to ground its fleet?
The Minister for Infrastructure and Transport.
I thank the member
for Mitchell
Karangamite for his question. And of course, Qantas have confirmed that the first time they advised the government that there was any consideration of a lockout of its workforce and a grounding of the fleet was after 2 p.m. on Saturday. The government acted immediately. By 10 p.m. that evening, the government was in Fair Work Australia seeking a stop to this decision. And just over 24 hours later, we had that decision that ensured that Qantas planes returned to the air on Monday afternoon. And today, Qantas is back in full scheduling. The parties have 21 days to get an agreement done, and the government calls upon both Qantas and the trade unions to bargain in good faith during this time and get this deal done in the interests of Qantas and in the interests of its workforce. Both parties must show some maturity, because the response of the community to this proposed lockout and grounding has been extraordinary. Because when you lock out a workforce and shut down an airline, you also lock out the customers. So we need to make sure that this deal gets done. Now, we know, because Qantas have confirmed when we were told. The Leader of the Opposition yesterday has confirmed when he was called about the specific 5 p.m. grounding on Saturday. What he has not said is when he was told that they were considering locking out the workforce and grounding their fleet.
The Minister for Infrastructure and Transport will resume his seat. Order! Order! The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, I ask you how it can be in order when the Leader of the Opposition has made a personal explanation about this matter yesterday and answered questions about this yesterday in press conferences and today. How can it be in order for the Leader of the House to make the same misrepresentations that he made yesterday?
The member for Sturt. For the newer members that believe that they can adjudicate, I'm about to give them a lesson. This has been a problem that this House has had for many, many years. And it's just interesting when people change sides, their interpretation of this problem is different. And as the member for Sturt is aware, as frustrating as it might be, as illogical as it might be, the House has never tackled this problem. And so there is only one thing that I can advise, that there are avenues and procedures within the House that an aggrieved member can take yet again, even if it is an iteration. The Minister for Infrastructure and Transport.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am asked about what the circumstances were leading up to the Qantas decision to lock out its workforce and ground its fleet. And I think the Australian public are entitled to know, because it is true that the Leader of the Opposition changed his position with regard to intervention last Friday. But what is also true is that the Shadow Treasurer had for some time called for government intervention. And last night we saw the Shadow Treasurer melt down on the 7:30 report. He melted down when he was asked when he knew that Qantas was considering locking out its workforce and grounding its fleet. And he went on to say that he couldn't recall.
His seat. The minister will resume his seat. Minister! Minister! Order. The member for member for Oxley might get to go and have a fondue if he doesn't sit there quietly. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Well, firstly, Mr Speaker, the Leader of the House is completely ignoring you, which is totally disrespectful when you asked him to sit down. Secondly, how could it be directly relevant for the Leader of the House to be shouting across the dispatch box about this answer to the question, completely not answering the question he was asked, just so that he can do a slag and bag on the Leader of the Opposition?
Will resume his seat. The Chief Government Whip will resume his seat too. Order. The member for Herbert, I would have hoped, learned a lesson yesterday. I simply say to the member for Sturt that if he had listened to the question, the minister was asked to advise the House of circumstances leading up to the Qantas decision to stand down the workforce and ground its fleet. Regrettably, it's a fairly wide question. It has led to a response that has had order. The only relevance that I'm worried about, Leader of the Opposition, is that if I'm disturbed about other people being interrupted, I'm awfully disturbed when it's the occupant of the chair, and I'll make the ruling, and there again are avenues open to if he has a problem. All I am simply saying is that because the House has not dealt with the standing orders, argument is allowed in responses, and there may be too much argument in this response, but it is allowed under the standing orders. The Minister for Infrastructure and Transport has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I can understand the sensitivity there, because it is quite extraordinary that you're the shadow treasurer of the nation. You get told that Qantas is considering locking out its workforce with all the implications for the national economy, and you say, I can't recall when I was told. With that sort of memory, no wonder he can't find the $70 billion that's down that black hole.
The minister will come back to the question.
With that sort of memory, no wonder he can't find that $70 billion.
The minister will come back to the question.
The shadow treasurer and others need to come clean about when they were told that Qantas was considering locking out its workforce. They are anti-worker.
The honourable member's time has expired. Order. The member's time has expired. The member for North Sydney.
My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. I refer the Acting Prime Minister to the fact—
The member for North Sydney will resume his seat, and he will get to start again. The member for Kingston. The member for North Sydney has the call, and he will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. I refer the Acting Prime Minister to the fact that the Department of Immigration's $1 billion budget for asylum seekers this financial year is based on just 750 boat people arrivals. Is he aware that in just the last 4 months there have been over 1,300 arrivals? Can he advise what the estimated blowout in the federal budget will be in asylum seeker management this year alone?
The Acting Prime Minister. Order. The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, those figures will be updated in the mid-year fiscal outlook, Mr Speaker, which is due by the end of the year. And that's when we will know what the outlook will be.
Order. Order. The member for Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Regional Australia, Regional Development and Local Government and the Arts, representing the Minister for Jobs and Workplace Relations. Will the minister inform the House how the Fair Work Act has ensured the dignity of working people and supported our economy? How were workers treated before the introduction of the Fair Work Act?
Good question.
The Minister representing the Minister for Jobs and Workplace Relations.
I thank the member for her question, because she entered this parliament on the basis of restoring dignity to workers, and the government that she joined did that. It did it by replacing the discredited work choices legislation with Fair Work Australia. Very interesting that in that excruciating interview that the member for North Sydney was involved in last night, when he was asked what their IR policy was, he said it's the government's policy. We don't intend to change it. So that policy that they went to the election on, that they got trounced on, they've now ditched. But does anyone believe them? Now, Mr Speaker, on this side of the House we don't. But so far as restoring dignity to the workplace, we did it in a number of ways. We restored fairness, we restored dignity, we restored good faith bargaining, and most of all we restored balance. Because industrial relations, when those opposite sat in office, was to take a one-sided approach to always back the employer and bash the worker. Now, what we did, we not only restored all of those values, Australian values, Labor values, we enshrined them in legislation. Now, I'm also asked how our legislation supported the economy. Well, it supported it in a number of ways. First of all, we've seen the fastest 4 years of employment growth ever in the history of this country. And the next 8 years are projected to double that again. That's on the basis of restoring fairness as well as the sound fiscal and economic policies that this government has introduced. We've also lowered industrial disputes compared to what was there when the Liberals were in office. And most recently we demonstrated how by using the Act we could get Qantas flying again, after Qantas took the precipitous decision of locking out its workforce and grounding the airline. Now, I go to this interview again that the member for North Sydney sweated over last night, and well he might, because in that interview, when he was asked the question about when did you hear that they were considering the option of grounding its fleet and locking out the staff, he said, "Oh, weeks ago." So here's the member for North Sydney at least admitting that it was weeks ago that they knew. So here's the Labor government working in the national interest to get the airline flying again, and the member for North Sydney acting in his own grubby political interest to make sure that their instrument of choice continues, the lockout.
The Minister will relate his remarks to the question and will assist if the member for North Sydney does not give him ample opportunity to respond to interjections. He should cease interjecting. The Minister should not respond to the interjections, and he should relate his material directly to the question.
Well, I've asked, Mr Speaker, how the workers were treated under previous legislation. Well, let me also remind people of the so-called call for early intervention that there have been a cacophony on in terms of us. When the member for North Sydney was the Minister for Industrial Relations, that excruciating interview again last night, he referred to his intervention in the TriStar dispute. Now, he acknowledges that. Let me tell you about that intervention in terms of expedition, because that dispute had been going for 18 months. That's right. As the member...
Order.
The Prime Minister of the day asked you to intervene.
Order.
You said that you did.
Minister will address his remarks through
and how did the Minister intervene? He intervened by urging bosses of the car parts worker to sack its entire workforce and re-employ them on individual contracts. Now, that's the attitude they would take to industrial relations. It's not the Labor way, but it is the Liberal way.
The Minister's late. Order. The member for North Sydney will withdraw. The member for North Sydney will withdraw.
Withdraw.
Order. Order. The member for Stirling.